maybe I know when I hear things, it doesn't always sink into my brain. So take a minute to kind of read through the learning targets. We're not going to get through all of it today, but we'll get through about half of it. And so we'll go through and do some together. And then hopefully we'll have time and you guys can get some practice and hopefully you leave today. We'll see. It'll be completely up to you guys. All right, so by the conversation, we're done reading and we understand what we're going to be learning over the next 2 days. Today and Monday.
I'm not going to remember anything today about Monday.
Well, that's why I'm recording it so then you can watch it. All right, so when you factor a polynomial, you rewrite the original polynomial as a product of 2 or more polynomials. So let's look at this here. So when we're factoring a polynomial, we're breaking it down into smaller parts. Right now you're telling me that you want to work on this on your own time. So looking at 4x cubed plus 2x squared minus 6x, we want to factor this. So what's the first step that we should always start? Looking at our x. All 3 terms have an x, right? Mm-hmm. So can we factor that out? Yeah. What else can be factored out of each term? 2. So let's start by factoring out a 2x. So we're going to divide each term by 2x. So 4x cubed divided by 2x is 2x squared divided by 2x. And negative 6x divided by 2x. All right, so now we have a quadratic. So now you can either use the quadratic equation to get your 2 roots, or you can use slide and divide. Okay, I'm looking at this. This is going to give me a negative 6, and that's a positive 1. So I'm going to use slide and divide. But you can use the quadratic formula too. So looking at this, so I slid this down to the end. So what are 2 numbers that when I multiply them together, I get negative 6? Same 2 numbers, when we add them together, we get positive 1. 3 and negative 2. All right, but I need to undo that slide that I did at the beginning. So here I multiplied, so what's the opposite of multiplication? So I'm going to divide each term by 2. 2 divided by 2. This doesn't divide, so I'm going to stick my 2 in front. And so if I FOIL this, I should get that. So now I am in a factored state. So what this does is now it makes it easier to find where my zeros are at. And if you remember that first question on the test, it asked you to find where the zeros were at, right? So what you're going to have to do is factor the polynomial out. And now we know that when this parenthesis equals 0, the whole thing is 0. When this equals 0, the whole thing is 0. And when that equals 0, the whole thing is 0. So now number 2 says make use of structure. Consider this expression. So we have x squared times the quantity x minus 3 plus 2x times the quantity x minus 3 plus 3 times the quantity x minus 3. So how many terms does this have? So how many pieces to the problem does it have? All right, so there we have 3 pieces, right? We have this first section, this, and this last one, right? And then for each piece that's there, what can we do? We have parentheses, right? So let's get rid of those. So this first one, we're going to distribute that x squared. So what's x squared times x? X squared times -3. And then for this next one, when we distribute, what do we get? And then for the last one? Alright, so can we combine them?
Yeah.
Alright, so when we combine them, what do we get?
X cubed.
Alright, so we have that one.
X squared.
Alright, so now how many terms does it have?
4.
It has 4. So up here we had 3 pieces, but when we distributed, we had 4 terms when it was in. What's this form called when we start with the highest degree and go down to standard? So in standard form, we have four terms. What factor do all the terms have in common? So let's go back up to here. So each of these, when it's in the factored state, what do each of the parentheses have in common?
3.
But they have the x minus 3, right? So we have that x minus 3 there. Right, Keith?
Yep.
Alright, so we have this x minus 3. So when they have that in common, what can we do like we did up here? We can take it out, right? These each had a 2x. So we can take this out. And what are we left with when we take that out?
X squared plus 2x.
I think I just did the next one. So what do they all have in common? They all have that x minus 3 in common. And then this whole thing is our factored form. Can it be factored further? Can we factor this?
No.
Are there 2 numbers that when we multiply by 3 we get 2? No. We have to use quadratic, right? Alright, so let's have some quadratic fun and do that real quick. So what's our a for this term? Actually, we'll just leave it there for now, if that's okay. So we'll leave it there. So think some quadratic binomials, a x squared plus bx plus c can be factored into 2 binomial factors. Is it going? I think so. But, yeah. All right, so looking at example A, we have 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. So the first thing is find the product of A and C. So find the product of A and C. So that's the slide part of slide and divide. Then find the factors of A times C that give you B. And then rewrite it. So that's just a different way of doing slide and divide. If you don't, I'd say stick with slide and divide and quadratic. If this makes sense to you, then go for it. But since we are familiar with slide and divide and quadratic, those would be the ones that I'd want you to stick with. Do we want to do this using quadratic just to refresh that real quick?
Sure.
Okay. So let's do we'll use A. We'll do A together using quadratic formula. So in this one, our A is, well, first off, can we take out a greatest common factor at all?
Nope.
No. So what's our A term? Our b term,
10.
and then our c is 10. Alright, so using the quadratic formula, so negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing divided by 2a. So negative 19 plus or minus 19 squared minus 4. Alright, so let's find our discriminant. I don't have a calculator up here, so I'm going to rely on you guys for help. So we have, inside we have 19 squared minus 4 times 6 times 10.
What's 19 squared?
So this is 241. Hold on, okay. So we have the square root of 241 all over. So now let's do negative 19 plus the square root of 241 all over 12. And then if somebody else would do negative 19 minus the square root of 241 divided by 12.
I don't think that's right. Oh, I think I did negative, that's why. Negative 241.
Alright, so I got 20 negative 19 negative 2.88 for that one. Negative 0.29. Is that? Alright, so this is what x equals. You know, it can then be written as fractions. So this is saying that x equals that. Since it's not perfect,
It says negative 29 over 100, but
okay. Well, yeah. Let me see something. What's going on?
backwards.
Sit down. Or go stand in the back. You're not distracting.
Let's say we'll stand with that.
This is 121.
Walker?
That's what Tucker told me, Kevin.
I didn't say
Kevin
anything.
Jr. I bet.
You still messed up.
It's okay. It gave us a learning opportunity. That if your answer doesn't make sense, to go back and check.
Or, no, you told me 120.
Hey.
Well,
back.
it's 121, so.
Alright.
So he said no.
I'm pretty sure that he said the right thing. I
I
misheard.
literally said exactly what Tucker told me.
Alright, so we have negative 19 plus or minus the square root of 121 divided by 12. What's the square root of 121?
That's negative 2.5, the first one.
So we have negative 19 plus 11, which is,
And that's negative 0.66.
alright, so as a fraction, what is that?
Negative.
And then our other one was negative 19 minus 11.
That was negative 2.5.
And then what is that as a fraction?
Negative 5 halves.
All right, so the x equals negative 2/3 and x equals negative 5 halves. How do we write that? Because when it's in factor form, it's not x equals. Everything's on one side. So I need to move this over. So moving this over so it equals 0. How does that read? X. I want to make this equal to 0 because in factor form, everything is in those parentheses. So everything is to the left of equal.
X plus 5 halves equals 0.
Yep. So we're just going to add that to both sides. So x plus 5 halves.
And then x minus 2/3 equals 0.
And x minus 2/3 equals 0. But do we typically have fractions in factor form?
No.
No. So in slide and divide, that last step is if these don't divide evenly, we put the 2 in front of the x.
2x plus 5.
So this parenthesis is going to be 2x plus 5. And then our other parenthesis, 3x minus 2. So now to check it, this all equals 0. If we FOIL this out, we should have our original equation. So 3x times 2x is 6x. And then 3x times 5.
15x. Negative 4x. Negative 4x. Negative 10.
How'd you know that?
Okay, go to this one.
Is that,
Oops.
where were you this morning?
All right, so I forgot my negative sign. So this is or my negative is 1 left. So this would be plus. So then this is
In your
plus.
bed?
What the heck, man?
You just said it in your bed. I know.
Well, that's
But-
nice to get all.
Yeah.
All right, so does that match the original?
I'm glad you
And
wanted
so-
to sleep.
For me,
Yeah.
checking was important because I realized that I did miss my negative sign that it had blended, and so I was able to go back and check it and make that correction.
I would have came, but I'm throwing both
Alright.
chocolate chips. I was just throwing this.
So do you want to do another one like that?
Yeah. Let's do another one. I go.
You may go use the facilities.
I go.
What'd you say, Gabe?
I have a question.
Let's finish this.
Let out the.
All right, so what I want you to do, since you guys are very talkative, let's do B. I would like for you to do B.
We get to do B?
You get to do B.
I'm not good at doing B.
So we are practicing either using the quadratic formula or slide and divide.
I already forgot how to do it.
I left my work up on the board.
Awesome.
Let me pause the internet though.
I think mine's wrong.
So with this one, what is our A, B, and C?
Yeah, where's your shade for? Why not?
All right, so let's set up the first part. So using quadratic, what goes in for negative B? Negative 8, right? So now we have positive 8. Plus or minus the square root,
When are you a senior?
negative 8 squared,
Which is 2,300.
What's it called?
and that's all over
2,300.
2 times 3, right? No, 2 times 6. Yeah, 2 times n.
Where did 2,304 come from?
Inside the square root.
All right, so now,
I was right.
so when we do this on our calculator, this is a negative 8, right? But we're squaring it. So parentheses, negative 8, close your parentheses squared. Or think to yourself, what's negative 8 times negative 8? 64.
64 times negative 4 times 3 times negative 3. And I got 2,000.
So then what's this
It's
number?
100.
Because the minus sign
So 4 times 3 is 12, times negative 3, we have
Oh.
positive 36
Makes it 100.
over 6. So now we have 8 plus or minus the square root of 100.
Square root of 100.
So now we have 8 plus 10, which is 3.
What?
Is
You
the
say 8
answer.
plus 10?
Is the answer. And then we have 8 minus 10.
I can tell.
Now this is what x equals, right?
Yes.
So now setting up our parentheses, how do we make this so that the 3 is with the x, that it equals 0? So this parenthesis is x minus 3. And then what's this parenthesis going to be? So we're going to add that 1/3 over. That's going to give us x plus 1/3 equals 0. But in factored form, we don't want a fraction here. So we're going to pop that 3 in front of the x. All right, so now for those using slide and divide, we're going to take this 3, slide it to the end. That gives us x squared minus 8x minus 9. So now we need two numbers that when we multiply them together, we get negative 9. Same two numbers, when we add them together, we get negative 8.
Try something with 1 and 9.
So our options are negative 1 and positive 9, or positive 1 and negative 9. So which ones give us negative 8?
That one.
All right, so at the beginning we multiplied, we did this multiplication to the end. We need to undo that. What undoes multiplication?
Division.
Is 9 divisible by 3?
No.
So that gives us x minus 3. This one, remove the 3 in front, so we get the same thing. All right, you guys have a few minutes left. One more problem. We're going to do the letter C. Unless you want homework.
That's your C.
So letter C, 2x squared plus 7x plus 6